Well, good day, folks. I hope you changed your clocks and fast forward them. Uh, Otherwise, you'll be late the whole day. Today I'm continuing my series on The Secret by Byron Price, and I'm talking about the Bugbear, otherwise known as the Backpacker. The Backer Packer, the Backpackers. The Bugbear. And so this is the story that's on page 152 and 153 in the book The Secret. So, if you want to hop on board, we'll see if we can unpack what was in the story. Pun, obviously, intended. So, we talked about bogarts, bogies, and that type of thing. And that immediately put me into the Humphrey Bogart category because Humphrey's middle name is DeForest Bogart. Who can resist a story about going into the woods and you have a character, a person that's middle name is DeForest, right? So Humphrey DeForest Bogart, nicknamed Bogey, was an American film and stage actor. He was in classical Hollywood cinema. He began acting in Broadway and motion pictures. Up the River, okay, The Petrified Forest, 1936. He was also the gangster Hugh Babyface Barton in Dead End. We've got a backpacker, and his first movies are Up the River and The Petrified Forest. And then he goes and does High Sierra and The Maltese Falcon. Well, I don't like to get caught up in all of the movies and the movie names that people are in. I mainly like to look at who the person is and what the highlights of their existence on this planet were. And he was born on Christmas Day in New York City, the oldest Belmont DeForest Bogart and Maud Humphrey. One of them was from Canandaigua, New York. One of them was an innkeeper, and the other one was a wealthy heiress. The name Bogart derives from the Dutch name Bogert. Belmont and Maud married in June of 1898. Netherlands, Episcopalian, they are descendants of the Mayflower. Passenger John Howland, by the way. This is a guy that has one of these birthdays that people debate. They don't know exactly which day he was born. Bogarts lived on the Upper West Side and had a cottage on a 55-acre estate at Canandaigua Lake in upstate New York. Again, Navy experience. All these people seem to have some experience in the Navy. But anyway, he attended the prestigious Trinity School and then the Phillips Academy boarding school. Although his parents hoped he'd go to Yale University, he left Phillips in 1980 after one semester, which was the preparatory school. And he went into the Navy and served as a coxswain. Oh, a coxswain. A coxswain. That's the guy on the boat that I think tells people when to row. No, I think by then they did a little bit, probably more than that. He reached the title of third mate. He was injured while taking a prisoner to Portsmouth Naval Prison in Maine. His acting performances started shortly after his stint on Broadway. And then he went to Hollywood and was in The Petrified Forest. So I think one of these movies or one of these people is Humphrey Bogart. He's also in the with Ingrid Bergman, his co-star in Casablanca. Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. Or maybe he didn't say that. And then also Key Largo, another one of Bogart's favorites. And then Who can forget the treasures of the Sierra Madre? Oh, anyway, getting into filmography is always a problem because most of these people uh, did a lot of work with others. One thing about Bogart is he was a founding member of Hollywood's Rat Pack, and in the spring of '55, after a long party in Las Vegas, attended by Frank Sinatra, Judy Garland, Sidney Luff, Michael Romanoff, and his wife Gloria, Angie Dixon, and some others, Bacall surveyed the wreckage and said, "You look like a goddamn Rat Pack." The name stuck and was made official at Romanoff's in Beverly Hills. So I kind of like Beverly Hills. So this gives me some more possible confirmation for Beverly Hills. Um, and I'm starting to think that if they want a Chinese reference to a puzzle in California, why not just go to the Greenwich Village of California uh, and look at the Greenwich Chinese Theater? Because all of these people are on the Walk of Fame there. Okay, so that's probably enough about Humphrey Bogart. So next, let's talk about the rucksack. How's that? You want to do a little rucksacking? So the history of the backpack, because we're talking about backpacking, right? Lloyd F. Nelson designed a backpack with a rigid frame for hiking called the Trapper Nelson in the 1920s. The Hubbard backpack was created by Jerry Cunningham in Boulder, Colorado in 1938. The military bags evolved into the 40s, and in the late 40s started bringing backpacks with them to school. In 1950, Ake Norden created a cotton bag with a wooden frame that could be held higher on the back and carried through the mountains. He later started a company named FJALL Raven, Fajal Raven. In 1952, a husband and his wife team named Dick and Nina Kelly took backpack design to the next level by welding a metal frame into a backpack. Plastisol Inc. opened a new world of printing on backpacks in 1959. A new streamlined backpack called the Alice made its debut during the Vietnam War. Transparent backpacks first came onto the market in the 1960s, made of lucite. Greg Lowe created the first internal frame backpack in his garage in Colorado in 1967. A college student named Skip Yowell started Jansport with his cousins in Seattle, Washington in 1967. Hmm, hmm, maybe this is the one. Maybe this is the one, or maybe the next one. Jansport was really popular back in the 1980s. Most of the college kids were packing a Jansport. Let's get you to that possible Seattle, Washington location, which I've been supporting. And so maybe the Bugbear backpacker is Seattle, Washington. In the 1980, a Harvard law student sent a suggestion to LL Bean to start selling bags to carry heavy books. They happily obliged with the book pack, which was found its way shortly after the Harvard bookstores. Oh, that would be right up the alley of these Harvard graduates. High school student Steve Mann fused technology and backbox into a wearable computer. The computer, also known as the iTap, was wired into a bag and ran to a head-mounted display. That was in 1981. I think that maybe towards the end of the book you could use Steve Mann's computer backpack, but LL Bean is mentioned in the article, and so maybe we should be focusing more on the pre-80 inventions of the backpack. So the next thing, I looked up who Bacchus was, just in case Bacchus Pacchus didn't just mean backpack. So Bacchus is the ancient Greek mythological creature Dionysus. And he's the god of the grape harvest, winemaking, orchards and fruit, vegetation, fertility, festivity, insanity, ritual madness, religious ecstasy, and theater. So there's maybe a little bit of the Greek influence and the Bacchus, if we were supposed to actually get into, who Bacchus was. More on the modern backpack. There's a company called Jerry Outdoors, and in 1938, they invented the first backpack with a zipper. A little bit more on Jerry Outdoors. It was basically a Jerry Cunningham, and he also released their Teardrop backpack in 1967. 3 years later, Jansport released their own lightweight nylon day pack, the ski and hike bag. So Jerry Outdoors is actually probably the first of the modern, and then the Jansport came along next. Okay, what's next? We're talking about okay, so the habits. After all these years, we still find it impossible to resist the call of the wild. Well, in case you didn't catch on, the Call of the Wild is a short adventure novel by Jack London, published in 1903 and set in Yukon, Canada, during the 1890s Klondike Gold Rush. It just in summary, basically, there's a 140-pound St. Bernard Scotch Shepherd mix dog that's happily living in the Santa Clara Valley in California, but the dog gets kidnapped, shipped off to Seattle, Jansport, uh, and gets shipped off to Seattle, and then it ends up after Buck is sold to the French Canadian uh, uh, people. He's trained as a sled dog, and he ends up as a sled dog. Now, if you like the Balto solve for New York and Central Park, you certainly can take a lot from the fact that they mention Jack London's story, The Call of the Wild, in the back of the book. Um, and so when Francois and Perrault complete the round trip of the Yukon Trail in record time, returning to Skagway with their dispatchers, they are given new orders from the Canadian government. They sell their sled items to a Scotch, quote, half-breed man who works in the mail service. And we've got this postal mailbox and all this. The dogs must take long, tiring trips carrying heavy loads to the mining area. Uh, so while running the trail, Buck seems to have memories of a canine ancestor who has a short-legged hairy man companion. Oh, some Sasquatch, I guess. Well, in the end of the story, the dog Buck ends up exploring the wilderness and socializing with the northwestern wolf. Well, there's another werewolf. Where was that? It was in Alaska. Okay, so that's the story about the Call of the Wild. It's set in basically set up in the Yukon, Alaska, and the dog spends time in the Santa Clara Valley and then Seattle. So Jack London, who's the author of this book, is an interesting also character. He is really such an interesting character. There's a lot to unpack when you get into Jack London. So John Griffith Cheney is his real name. He's a novelist. He was part of the radical literary group The Crowd in San Francisco. So this gets you some of that San Francisco connection. The two famous works that he has is Call of the Wild and White Fang. And White Fang is a wolf dog story. I remember we had the Tupper werewolves and the werewolves of London. Oh, the werewolves of London. The werewolves of Jack London. White Fang. So you got White Fang here, and White Fang is a novel it's about a wild wolf dog, and it's serialized in Outing magazine in 1906, and it's again another Yukon Territory Northwest Gold Rush, and in this story, a wolf dog hybrid is born with two men and their sled dog team on a journey to deliver the coffin of Lord Alfred to a remote town named Fort McGurry. in the higher area of the Yukon Territory. So basically, you've got a dog going to a fort. Oh, let's see. In real life, Balto is delivering supplies to a fort. One day the pup comes, and the she wolf comes to his rescue. So I'm not going to read you the whole entire story of White Fang. I'm just going to point out that it's a story about another a werewolf and well, at least a wolf dog anyway, and it's repeats the werewolf of London theme that's in the back of the book. Okay, back to Jack London's actual family history, which also is fairly substantial. And so he was, his mother's name was Florida Wellman. Well, I just added a little bit to that. It's actually just Flora Wellman. His father was the Pennsylvania Canal builder Marshall Wellman. And one of the images, it looks to me like there's a canal of some sort. And it's really cold in that image. And where's Balto? Well, I'm going to be on Balto until I get booted off with information that tells me that it's not Balto in Central Park. Because I've had these stories about dogs and their companions and how dogs are in this. And anyway, so his family moved around the San Francisco Bay Area and finally settled in Oakland. He went to the University of California, Berkeley. He was involved in the earthquake days because that's about the time he was born. He was born near 3rd and Brannan Streets in San Francisco. He signed on with a sealing schooner, Sophie Sutherland. That's an actual boat bound to the coast of Japan, and he returned just in time for the Panic of '93. So then he went to the gold rush, got married in 1900 to marry Elizabeth May Vesey Mattern. He became a war correspondent, a member of the Bohemian Club. And the Bohemian Club, by the way, met at a clubhouse on Nob Hill District of San Francisco. And I have posited at one time, the Nob Hill area as being a possible solve if you like the one image to be in the San Francisco area. So here's Jack London in the Nob Hill area at the Bohemian Club. He's an animal activist. He was sleeping on the porch of a cottage's ranch. He had suffered some illness, including scurvy in the Klondike, and he had the yaws. And so let's see. I'm not sure. Buildings and property were later preserves of the Jack London State Historic Park in Glen Ellen, California. Okay, some people think he committed suicide, but and then other people think that he might have plagiarized some stories over time and that some of his work wasn't real, and the guy was an atheist. He joined the Socialist Labor Party in 1896. Okay, so I think that pretty much knocks down the whole entire story of Jack London. There's some more about eugenics and bookplate used by Jack London. And it's interesting if you look at the bookplate that Jack London actually used. It has a wolf on it. For those who like the wolf, and the Valley of the Moon emphasizes the theme of real Americans. That kind of goes in with that werewolf thing. The moon, you know what I'm saying? Another novel he wrote was The Sea Wolf, by the way, The Iron Heel, and the Martin Eden. Martin Eden is a novel about a young struggling to become a writer. Okay. that's Jack London. Let's see. The next item mentioned is the portable stove. And the portable stove, by most accounts, was popularized, if not invented, by um, Gary Coleman in the TV show Different Strokes. Okay, that's not true. But it was popularized by the Coleman Company. The idea of this stove came from the Army, but the design was created by experts at making portable stoves and lanterns. During the war, the Army approached William Coleman about developing a portable stove for military use. And he did. He created a stove. After the war, he began marketing his Coleman military burner as the stove of tomorrow for quick cooking, for heating water, for sterilization, for 100 other uses where clean, fast heat is needed. And so, post-war, the GI Pocket Stove became a $9.95 item in the fall of 1947 Sears and Roebuck's catalog, where you could order as many pocket stoves as you like. I mention all of this because the Coleman Company was founded in Wichita, Kansas. Maybe if we look at the Wizard of Oz, and now we have found the witch. We found the witch of the Wizard of Oz. It's Wichita, Kansas, and the Coleman stove. So the military army knife is the next thing, and that's the Swiss Army knife. And I just remember when I was in high school, all of my friends would show up with a Swiss Army knife, a multi-tool, if you will. And by that time, I think the patent had expired in a number of companies like Martin Marietta, and that's why they called it the Martian knife, because that one was made by Martin Marietta Company, Lockheed Martin, if you will. We talked about Lockheed Martin just recently, as a matter of fact. And so you get that, but the original manufacturer was a Victorinox, Victorinox. And I swear I must be losing some of my mental capacity because I used to be able to pronounce names much easier than I can now. And so the Swiss Army knife, which is the Martian knife, got its start in 1851 in the Moby Dick chapter 107, where Herman Melville mentions the Sheffield contrivances, assuming the exterior, though a little swelled, of a common pocket knife, but containing not only blades of various sizes, but also screwdrivers, corkscrews, tweezers, awls, pins, rulers, nail filers, and countersinkers. So, if you like the idea that there's a whale in some of these images, and that Melville and Moby Dick play into your solve, here's some caution provided to you by the Martian Swiss Army knife. And again, in 1891, Carl Eisner manufacturing these knives in Switzerland. Okay, the next item is the fishing vest, or the 18 pocket thing that you can put crap in. I believe this to be the fishing vest, which is often worn by people even if they're not fishing, is a multi-pocket storing device. The vest was improved upon in its design and first released onto the market just after World War II. It was called the Lee Wolf. I don't make this stuff up. I just research it. It was called the Lee Wolf Tackle Pack and was made by Masland of Carlisle, Pennsylvania. The rest, as they say, is history. So there's your first popularization of a multi-pocketed top in order to use to store all kinds of fun stuff. Basically, Leo Wolf was a very creative angler, fly tyer, and outdoor writer, having, among other things, developed the line of dry flies that are named for him. So if you've ever came across a wolf fly, or a forest fen fly, for that matter, please contact me, because I would be interested in your forced fin flies. Okay, so the Spartan Silvertech knife is the one made by Lockheed Martin. Victronics in North America in 1972, the Forstner Butcher Scale Company of New Britain, Connecticut, became the exclusive distributor of the Victronics style. In 1981, the company went public, and Charles Eisner, president, acquired a significant percentage of its shares. So Swiss Army knife becomes public. Okay, so the next thing is the bugbear might just be the mosquito. And so this gets into the development of DEET. And the DEET was developed by the United States Department of Agriculture and is widely accredited as being invented in the citronella as being a citronella and then DEET. So during World War II, American soldiers stationed in the Pacific carried insecticides. After the war, the Department of Agriculture jointly developed the repellent ingredient DEET. And I don't know where that development occurred, but I know that DEET was popularized by Off, which is Off, and it's an insect repellent brand that was sold by S.C. Johnson. It was first sold in 1957. Well, the S.C. Johnson company, I think, is that company that was from Racine, Wisconsin. I know the other place that was in Racine, Wisconsin, is a tractor manufacturing, maybe Ford, New Holland, or Case, or something like that. I'm going to do some more research on Racine. See if I can come up with anything that might fit one of the puzzles. Anyway, so that's I think the off. Let's see. This story here was about. Okay, so the next thing is that they're using Lux soap and they're using another soap to clean up ducks. And there was a grassroots group after that became known as GOO, GOO, kind of like Off. And this was at the University of California at Santa Barbara. And the fact that the first oil spill, or a huge oil spill, occurred off of the coast of California resulted in the first Earth Day. And so Earth Day in 1970 spawned from this. And, Earth Day, when it first happened, and there's a picture of a dead bird. It's obviously not a duck because ducks aren't really sea birds. But the interesting thing is that there was many photographs of all the people cleaning ducks with soap. And the participants expressed apprehension of the dark air polluting toxic waste, the Cuyahoga River burning, and suburban sprawl overtaking the wilderness. They discussed survival long before global warming became a buzzword. Well, the Cuyahoga River burning, this happened famously, I'm going to tell you where, in Cleveland, Ohio. So the idea of pollution had gotten so bad that there was this deal where that happened. And unfortunately, the magazine, that article is from the Washington Post, and they put up a paywall. So I can't tell you about the fable of the burning river in Cleveland, but this might have helped people if they realized that the Earth Day Cleveland river was and the toxic waste. In several of these images in the book, there's the smoke rising from something, and I've always thought that related to the pollution at Cascades Park in Tallahassee, Florida. Now, having lacked substantial validation of my Tallahassee solve and the pollution that was in Cascades Park, I'm perhaps willing to back off of my Florida solve being in Tallahassee, and with the revelation in the back of the book of some information that leads me to the Tupper werewolves in Kissimmee, Florida, and Orlando, the Walt Disney information presented earlier, and the Rollins College information that you got from Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, I'm now starting to center my efforts in Florida around Orlando, Florida, because this was also confirmed not only by that, by the location of Richard Nixon holding his two fingers in the air behind a podium saying, "I am not a crook." And those famous lines occurred at a hotel in Walt Disney World's Park in Orlando. So all of this pollution inferences and references may be more directed at the Cleveland Cuyahoga River burning than it was my solve for Cascades Park. So I'm not open to new interpretations of things. So the Lux soap is a London Unilever brand, and so maybe this just dovetails with the Werewolves of London. The other soap mentioned, I think, was Does soap does everything. Does everything. And so if you talk about the Does soap company, this is a Procter and Gamble, and Procter and Gamble takes us back to Cincinnati again. Procter and Gamble again we were introduced to Procter Gamble and Gamble earlier when we learned about Drano and how Drano. I think this is where Drano comes in. Maybe not. Well, anyway, it's either off or Procter and Gamble, one of the two. They also ended up buying Drano, and we were introduced to Drano, I think, earlier. These consumer products companies had consolidated by 1980, a lot of them, and so anyway, LL Bean is specifically mentioned in the book, and it's a privately held company. LL Bean was founded in 1912 by Leon Wood Bean. So the previous story or so ago, we found Frank Baum, who wrote Wizard of Oz, and we found the witch in this story that was in Wichita in the Coleman Company. We've now found Leo the Lion. We have found Leo Bean in Freeport, Maine. And he invented this Maine hunting shoe. And I don't know which one of these shoes is the most important, but there's got to be a shoe involved here. The Bean Sr., he died in Pompano Beach, Florida. And maybe we're talking about Jack and the Beanstalk. I don't know. But so is the old elder Bean ended up dying in Pompano Beach, Florida. I don't really think there's one of these that's in Maine, in Freeport, Maine, or somewhere like that. And I don't know if they're trying to point out his clothing or, this vest. So it's kind of hard to figure out exactly, what. One thing is that the flagship store, which had been open 24 hours a day since 1951, actually closed for President John F. Kennedy's funeral. And that's one of the only 4 or 5 times in the history of the store that it's ever closed. And so maybe that's what you're supposed to get out of LL Bean. I don't know. but that's an event that would have occurred. And so I don't know. I think maybe that's what we're supposed to get out of LL Bean, because I think there's a clue for every puzzle in all these puzzles. The other thing about LL Bean is that you get into this idea of mail order businesses. And later in the book, we will find a couple of other mail order businesses that were started and that were mentioned. But he put out a hunting and fishing catalog, so you can mail order. Okay, now we're gonna dive deep. We're gonna really dive deep in this presentation. We're diving deep because we're getting to the Emerald Isle. We're getting to the Emerald Isle, and it says specifically here something about until the women of Ire banded together and cut down every tree on the Emerald Isle. Well, okay. I thought this might have had to do with the tree cutting party that Mayor Drapeau had in Canada at Mount Royal. But I'm wondering if this has to do with the actual Emerald Isle. And the Emerald Isle could be North Carolina. And you better pay attention because you might go get a cask out of this section right here. Because the Emerald Isle is North Carolina, 107 Blue Water Drive. Well, I'm not saying that's the actual deal, but there's this guy by the name of Amos Mosquito, Atlantic Beach. Okay, Amos Mosquito's Atlantic Beach. It's a restaurant, and right next to Fort Macon State Park. And I don't know how long Amos Mosquito's restaurant has been at that location, Emerald Island. But if it had been there in 1982, I am going to tell you right now that I believe that there is a cask located at Fort Macon State Park on the Emerald Island, North Carolina. And, there's obviously a North Carolina cask because we have beat this to death with all of these coincidences that have shown up before with the Filthy Hobbit and Raleigh Durham, Duke. And now we're getting mosquito bug spray, and we're getting a specific mention of Emerald Island. And so you're talking about bogeys, bogarts, boogies, and double bogeys. The Emerald Island is partially bounded by the Bogue Sound. The actual Bogue Sound is the land between the Emerald Island. And we talked about Theodore Roosevelt, and Emerald Island has the Theodore Roosevelt Nature Area on the island. And you ask the question, how can you narrow it down? And this is, I think, the way you can do it. But I'd be curious to see how long Amos Mosquito's restaurant has been on the Emerald Island. And maybe this is a new thing that just got put in, or maybe Jackie Kennedy ate there at some point in time. But I am kind of falling in love with the North Carolina Sol that's off of Bogue Island. And so there's Senator Gene Preston Memorial Park here as well. And This is all on Canal Drive. And remember, today I mentioned this uh, place where Jack London's father was a canal builder. And we're talking about the Senator Gene Preston Memorial Park being on Canal Street or Canal Drive on the Emerald Island. And so it says here also that for centuries I got lost in the woods. It was a perfect excuse for the day late Irishman until women of ire. So I don't know if you like the bogey, if you like the bugbear, if you like the bogue sound, and you like the back of the book, why would you not at least consider that they're telling you the truth about the Emerald Island? Okay, so now I'm gonna harpoon this, and then I'm gonna go back and fill in some more blanks. They might just be referring back to the land of Oz and the Emerald City when they're talking about this wonderful Emerald Island. So Fort Macon was named after Major General Ambrose. Oh no. In 1862, the Union Army of Major General Ambrose E. Burnside, and a lot of you like Burnside because you think that there's a connection to Burnside. Well, anyway, the War of 1812. Remember when we talked about the Pentagorigan or the Pentagorigon? I would encourage you to look at the Fort Macon photograph, courtesy of the North Carolina Division of Tourism, Film, and Sports Development. Because Fort Macon is a 5-sided fort. Let me repeat that. Maybe the Pentagorian isn't modern day Pentagon, but Fort Macon Pentagon shaped fort. Now, I know there's a lot of people in the secret have pointed out, oh, look at this baseball shaped fort in this city, and not supported it with the back of the book. I'm giving you back of the book support, Bogue Banks, Beaufort Inlet, Beaufort Harbor reference to an actual structure that has 5 sides and has a reference to the back of the book. Okay, so I'm just saying, Fort Macon, take a look at it. Look at the shape of it. And you tell me how your baseball shaped fort is a better match. And oh, by the way, you can't use that image for Boston because it's not the right image. You guys have not explained the exploding sugar bag yet. All right, so Nathaniel Macon is the namesake. He was an old Republican statesman. You can read about his military service, Roanoke campaign. So the thing about him is that he was a trustee for the University of North Carolina. And we know where the University of North Carolina is. And we have had other connections to the University of North Carolina. So maybe that was to get us to the fort. He has interaction with the Jackson presidency, which he actually wasn't that excited about. He was presiding officer at the state constitution. So he was largely responsible for a lot of the people seeing Carolinas for potential expansion. Okay, so I think I about shot my wad on that. So Daniel Boone, I think, lends some credibility I think we've seen the coonskin cap a number of different times in these images, right? We've all seen the coonskin cap. And so we know there's a reference to Daniel Boone at some point. But what is the reference? Because he has history with the Cherokee Indians. Does that take us to Cherokee Park? Well, maybe, but the Cherokee Park might be in St. Louis or North Carolina. But the most important thing, or one of the important things you need to know about Daniel Boone, is that he joined the North Carolina Militia Company as a teamster and a blacksmith. So they're taking you back to North Carolina with Daniel Boone. And then Daniel Boone then can get you to these other places if you like into Kentucky. But he originally was a North Carolina blacksmith. And, he gets captured by a party of Shawnee Indians. Well, if you like the Shawnee part, you can go, back to Wichita and look at Shawnee and the Shawnee Indians. And so anyway, Daniel Boone, let's see, there's the whole Sycamore Shoals type of deal. He was also involved in trying to establish a colony to be called Transylvania. Well, that might go along with the evil necromancers. The evil necromancers, Dracula. And Dracula was mentioned in the evil necromancers. He founded Boonesboro along the Kentucky River and Harrodsburg. So you have Boone and the American Revolution and the stuff like that. So Lewis and Clark's expedition, Meriwether Lewis and the other guy Clark. So here you get the Louisiana Purchase, but you have to realize that William Clark and Lewis actually met at St. Charles, Missouri, and then went up the Missouri River. The expedition crossed the continental divide of the Americas near the Lemhi Pass. They did not go up the Mississippi River, folks. Common mistake by those who like Louisville. Oh, Lewis and Clark expedition. We're talking about Louisville. No, you're talking about St. Louis again, because the Lewis and Clark expedition started in the St. Louis area, folks. It did not start in Louisiana. People these days like revisionist history. They don't actually like the facts because the facts do not support their solve. The expedition returned to St. Louis to report its findings to Jefferson with maps, sketches, and journals in hand. No, Lewis and Clark did not return to New Orleans. They returned to St. Louis. So that tells you about the Lewis and Clark expedition. Also, in 1905's Lewis and Clark expedition in Portland, Oregon. So you get the connection to Portland, Oregon through Lewis and Clark and that Pacific Northwest potential solve. I think it's Seattle. It could be Portland. I'm trying to figure it out. It might just be the Columbia River. I don't know. But in the 1803s, Jefferson sent Lewis to Philadelphia to study medicinal cures under Benjamin Rush, a physician. So I'm going to let you do your further research because there's a lot to unpack here with, Lewis and Clark starting in St. Louis and ending up in the Pacific Northwest. But I will bring you one thing. If you're really truly are going to look at the immigration aspect of The Secret and you want a Russian connection, you need to read and learn about the Astoria. When John Jacob Astor was seeking a way in which the fur business would capitalize on uh, finding a water or land route to the Pacific coast. And he sent one group of people around the tip of South America, because the Panama Canal wasn't there, by the way. And he sent another across land, and he set up a establishment in Astoria. And this was almost Russian territory at the time. And if you, the other thing, if you want a Russian connection, the whole state of Alaska, and we just know that Jack London stories primarily are set in Alaska. So Russian connections, I think, are evident when you start looking at um, Astoria. But that was a little sidebar. Um, there's the whole story of Sacagawea and all that in here too. So the trail is clearly marked. Follow the signs. You know how I like the Hollywood sign? It says follow the signs. Keep the sun on your right. Keep the sun on your right. Well, okay, if you're in the United States and you want to keep the sun on your right, you have to be going north to be on the east coast, or going south to be on the left coast. I don't know. Moss only grows on the north side of trees. If you carry it in, carry it out. Don't panic. Timber wolves at every bit. Oh, timber wolves are every bit as afraid of you as the mountain lions are. Mountain lions. Okay, folks, I think I've covered all of my bookmarks. And so I'm going to just conclude by saying, after that, Boone returned to North Carolina to take his family back to Kentucky. In the autumn of 1779, a large party of immigrants came with him, including the family Captain Abraham Lincoln, grandfather of the future president. Oh, you wondered how I was going to tie this into Abraham Lincoln, weren't you? You were just wondering. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you need to throw away your Fayette County militia references and the Follett's and Fayette's. Follow the evidence. I'm ready to hop in my car and drive to Fort Macon right now. I'm so convinced by this back of the book story that might be where we need to go. All right, folks, if you've stayed this long, you truly must appreciate my efforts in unveiling the information in The Secret. If you've dropped off, or if you haven't mustered the whole entire hour, I think you missed out on a lot at the end, because I think at the end of this, when I start talking about this potential solve, where they're talking about the Bogue Bay, and they're also talking about, Fort Macon and Mosquito. And if that guy's restaurant, that Mosquito restaurant's been there since 1980, man, I'd hop in my car and take off and go look for this one, because I think there's some pinned down information in that. Oh, Jeff says he's making bacon today. Making bacon. And I'm not talking Macon, Georgia. I'm talking Fort Macon in North Carolina. All right, Jeff, thanks for joining me today. I know this has been a long presentation. I am going to take a moment, refresh, and come back and talk about the foul sewer odors. And I think this might have to do with Mayor Lindsay's sanitation strike in New York. Anyway, I think there's something to this I think, and maybe you can help me with this. Wasn't there a big disaster where they had a whole bunch of ducks covered in oil off of the either uh, Louisiana coastline or the North Carolina coastline back in the 80s. I already mentioned that one that happened out in California, but I'm looking for one that affected a bunch of ducks instead of you know, and they're going to be migratory birds. So maybe that would be Houston. I don't know. All right, I'm just babbling now. So, all right, well, thanks for joining in. I will be back when I get the next one queued up. It'll be my 50th anniversary, the Foul Sewer Ogres, episode number 50. Coming up shortly.